All right, we are back for another episode with just me and Ash again, and it's Halloween. We're recording this on Halloween. You won't be listening to this on
Happy
Halloween.
Halloween.
We are recording it on Halloween. So, with that in mind, we're doing the Halloween theme here of things that are spooky in softball. We're softball trading. And shout out, even though she is not recording with us this week, this is Laura's theme, and Laura's big Halloween lover. So this is for her. So
I give Laura a hard time because she shops for the Halloween decorations in August.
Yeah, she's very into it.
She's one of those
quite
people.
The setup. Yeah, she had quite the setup for the girls yesterday for the candy station. So we close on Halloween. The facility. We're obviously working still with our remote athletes, everything, but we close the facility so that everyone can partake in the fun. So, as always in the Chicago area, it's a lovely rainy day. It was 82 and sunny yesterday, and it's been raining all morning, and it's going to be like 50 by the time we trick or treat, because that is how Halloween works in Chicago. So last year it was snowing, so 50 is lovely.
It's true. Yeah,
it's better. So okay, I'll start. My first spooky thing is hitting training that lacks any variability. So like just straight up your bat, softballs, front toss. That is my spooky thing. I think we've done that a lot in hitting, and it really is not the best or most efficient use of training.
That's like the foundation of all hitting lessons, right? Like you just
swing a bat. Yes. And I think our understanding that, well, we could throw to different locations or we could do different things. It's but not in a way that is realistic. The ball is coming in at a different plane from a different distance. It's a lot easier. You don't actually mix speed. It's not deceptive if you do mix speed. There's a lot of struggles to it. So we've seen so many athletes who come to us who have a lot of positive things, have a lot of power when they swing. But as soon as we incorporate machine, even in the assessment, because our assessment gets to machine, that the variability that the machine has just by having down spin or, just the variability that comes with a real ball coming out of a machine causes a ton of swing and misses. Just that.
You know what, Krista? This is, let's return to the 11-year-old for a hot second, just because.
Boy. The gift that keeps on giving.
Yes, because obviously people are still commenting. The best comment that you sent to me this week is when someone wrote the podcast from 2 weeks ago, and someone wrote basically, who is this lady? She doesn't know what she's talking about. That's the best comment I've ever heard. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. But what you're describing is stability versus variability, right? Hitting, everyone knows, is about we're not even trying to repeat a swing. You never even get the chance to.
Right.
It's just about having the adjustability to adjust to. We're trying to create the variability in pitching, and you're trying to adjust to it. Let's keep it simple here. And so how many young kids, Krista, have you seen get to the machine, which is where there's the highest level of not only intensity, but adjustability factor? What you're saying is where they may be successful is when all the art form requires is for it to just look relatively stable, correct?
Right.
In a controlled environment, right? And we're more controlled in pitching, right? We don't have to respond to an implement. Right. So taking it all the way back, the lady who doesn't know anything is basically coming back to this concept of it's the same thing in hitting.
No.
There is no young kid coming in and smoking the machine.
The people who are obviously, there's all of the highest levels of your ticket to the highest level is about bat speed and exit velo and all the things that are going to give you the best chance of success in these moments. But also the most, freakish hitters that you watch on TV, go down and get some ridiculous ball that looks nothing like their regular swing, and they only hit it 42 miles per hour, but they're able to locate it into a spot that gets them in it. That's also part of it. That's not what they do for the majority of time. They also have to have power and they have to do all these things, but they're a level of adjustability, and how they get that power allows them to do those things. So that's what I would say is spooky. If that's all you're doing for hitting, you're probably
on behalf of the 11-year-old hitting community, I think you might hear that you don't know what the hell you're talking about. I hope you do. Join the club.
Yeah, I actually think
it's good.
There was some discussion about something like this on on Twitter with Jordy. Jordy's starting like a hitting debate. I'm like, Jordy, what you doing, man? It's to stay in your lane. Bless her heart. So hopefully she listens to this. But I think that there, and it's not to say we don't do front toss. We do front toss, but I also mean like we do front toss where we change the bats, we change the angles. Like we're constantly introducing variability into the training to help them feel differences and feedback and all of the things they need to do. So this is not like you should just walk in the door and only swing off the machine. That's definitely not what I'm saying. But it can't just be straight up. That's why I said it's really also just about like the variability. It can't just be straight up front toss, being tossed
the other
from
extreme. Not good.
One location with your bat with a ball. It's just not, it's spooky.
Right.
It's definitely spooky.
Wait, do you remember way back in the, what's spookier than that is the fact that we did that probably
all the time. And the
back
other
a decade,
thing about
man.
A hitting coach, and every hitting coach listening to this knows exactly what I'm talking about, is that you have the kid who's just like really it's tough. Like it's really
the bat, man.
Tough. And yes, and you get what determines if you're really good is if you can throw the ball where that bat is going to end up, so they can be like,
gotta end on a good one. Gotta end on a good one. Wrap it up.
Just like, all right, Sally, keep your eye on it this time. And then you throw it right to her bat and she hits it. And you're like, I told you, keep your eye on it.
And you're like, little do you know, I installed a magnet system betwing the barrel of your bat and this ball.
That's been a long time since none of our hitters are listening to this. Should think I'm talking about them, because it's been a long time since I have done that, because now I would just strike them out probably, and let them adjust to it. But, yes, there was a time where much of my day felt like I was just meeting people's bats intentionally so it looked good in front of their parents. That is spooky. That's way spookier.
That's spooky, or the spookiest of all. Yes.
All right, what do you got?
Well, I want to preface this by saying that basically the status, years ago, I determined that the status of pitching and pitching development was so damn spooky that basically we launched the current state of OGX, right? So like, it kind of could go endless, right? Of like where we're going to conferences and like hearing the things that we're stuck in wherever. But I would call them spooky now when I'm still in conversation with people and still hearing concepts that I'm like, no, we've got to be beyond that now. Like we weren't beyond that 7 years ago, when we were listening to these things in conferences and we're like, hell no, this cannot be it. We've got to push for more. But like, aren't we now? So I got a couple. And I think I could probably go on forever. So, let's cut me off when time mandates it. One I would say that, I can't stand is when a pitcher, she's one of like an OGX pitcher. So then I'm like, really, then I'm mad at myself if she says one of the spooky things. But she'll be like, oh, I had a high school game. How'd it go? Not good. Okay, no problem. Tell me what it is. I like for them to always know, like, okay, when I'm strong, it's because of this. And I know how to tunnel this. And my drop ball looks like this. And then, like that's the education we're trying to give. And when I'm not, it's because of X, Y, Z. And she's like, wasn't hitting my spots. I'm like,
I just posted a Twitter post about this for hitting. It's also,
you did?
Or the hitting version will be like, I was dropping my hands, and I'll be like, based on what? Like, is that a thing that has ever happened for you? And they're like, because I hit a pop fly. Because I hit a pop fly. I'm like,
the first thing that I think, well, one, they said I didn't hit my spots either because they've been programmed for so long, but probably just their coach in high school said to you, didn't hit your spots, and that's why you were back.
So it's like, don't regurgitate.
I black out for a second. Like I literally black out. I'm not conscious. I wake up and then I introduce myself to that person. Like we clearly never met. Because if we did, then you would know not to say that to me. It is not like, it's not about hitting spots. I might have lost my AirPod there. Are we good?
Yes, you're all good.
Fell out of my ear. I'm just getting so animated that I lost my AirPod. Welcome to my life. Okay, so there are many times where even I'm on the call with coaches and they'll be like, she doesn't hit her spots. And for me, I'm like, I guess we got to change our language a little bit around like hitting spots versus like commanding your pitches. We might have a pitch that doesn't break a lot and we know like she's got to command that, locate it really, really well. But when we're talking about a breaking pitch, if the kid has an 8-inch drop ball, she knows that's her tool. She can't say I didn't hit my spots, because the reality is when that tool's at its best, you probably could throw it straight through the middle. We're talking about high school. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like you didn't have command over your pitches, or you didn't break very well. Like we see pitchers who essentially are like overdoing it, trying to generate power from the upper body, stiff arm action. Like And all of a sudden, we're seeing like their break is not as good. They fluctuate from 5 to 8 inches, and that's something that we're working on. And when it's 5, it gets hit. So I guess when they don't give me an educated meaning about themselves, an educated response, like I just didn't feel like I was getting good enough break. I was starting the pitch where I normally do. It was getting hit hard. I threw my changeup in the dirt too often. Like something that's like when I am really good, I get swings and misses on a drop ball and my changeup gets called for a strike. Like that's it, you know? And like I wasn't doing those two things, but just like I didn't hit my spots. I can't breathe. I don't know how else to explain. Like I can't breathe. And it's honestly go ahead.
Hitting spooky one because this came up. Okay. I actually forgot that this happens, like that this is a real thing people do. And then this recently came up in our facility. But what is very spooky is when people hit first in warm-ups and don't warm up until after hitting. It's mind-boggling. This used
Wait,
to,
what do you mean warm up? Like a dynamic warm up?
They have a game warm up, and they go right into the cages, and they swing. Right, and that's the first thing they do. And then when they get done with that, they all go do a dynamic warm up, and then they throw. This sounds a real thing.
Ridiculous, but I have been a part of in my college coaching days that I'm now thinking of. I'm like, no, we did that.
No, that's how definitely this was the thing when we played, and like. It's confusing. We saw it happen like when we very first started collecting data. I remember we went to school, the school shall remain nameless, and they did this because we were like, what's happening right now? They're just like going to this thing. So this definitely has happened in the past. Like I know this was a thing in the past. But we just recently, I've heard it happen a lot in high school. And I think some of it is slightly complicated because there's also like, I don't know that it's complicated because it's insane to swing not being warm, but whatever. But there's like timing things, right? So the like bus is late or whatever. So I have heard it happen some in high school ball, which is like whatever. High school just seems like
they get a pass,
so
man.
it's just like whatever happens there. Yeah. But recently in travel ball, we've had this conversation where a few travel ball teams, so they like go and they hit, and then they do their dynamic.
Krista, let's use this as an opportunity to teach the OGX podcast audience the phrase we use all the time in OGX is, do we like that? Which is when we say, do we like that? The answer is automatically no, we do not.
Dynamic warm-up is 5 minutes. Like when I coached a travel team, they were done with it in 7 minutes at the most. Like this is not like go warm up for 42 hours. Like this is a very short thing. This doesn't need to be crazy, but swinging is like it's like this like violent rotational one of move. The most intense things that happens in the game. So I don't like. It is confusing how. Let's just say this didn't still happen, but when we know it happened when we played, what we were all like, this makes sense. Let's go.
You know what I think people think when they do that is because they're like, well, I start on the tee, and then I go to front toss, and then maybe machine
hitting is warming you up.
Yeah, and so basically I go from like a low intense, like that's the warm up, but your swing, you don't like slowly swing. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like the swing, but barely. I mean, you're still like, in order to even like sync up your body, like you're swinging. You're going like full range of motion.
Like at the time that we did that, we also did like wrist snaps into it. So you could argue that for everything. Why hitting was the one that got like chosen as like, I need to warm up for that. It's so crazy.
Right. So for throwing, you can't lift your shoulder before you hold your elbow and snap your wrist.
We're not even talking about wrist snaps. That's too far in the history books. But
totally.
Yeah, the not warming up and using hitting as your warm up or doing your dynamic warm up after hitting. That's definitely spooky. It's pretty spooky.
Ooh, that's something to do. After
we should just follow people around, and when they're doing spooky things, just make that noise in the background.
Yeah. Ooh, happy Halloween. They're like, dude, it's July. Like,
It's getting spooky in here, though.
Getting spooky. This one, I like how we're like, this is like, basically these are things that annoy the hell out of us. We're calling them spooky because it's Halloween. Okay. One thing that's spooky to me is when people come back from college camps as we approach the winter college camp season, people will come back and be like, I'm like, you're due for a high-speed video, or like a remote athlete will come and like send their video. I'm like, well, just why do you look like that all of a sudden? Why does your motion look like that? Like, well, I went to the University of so-and-so and they told me that this is what my motion should look like. And I think like, please if you are in a college camp, don't change people's patterns, because as we know, patterns are always linked to ball flight. Do most people need to improve their patterns in order to get better ball flight data? Yes, but there's no basis of that. Just send them to camp. Tell them what it looks like to be good enough to play at your school, whether it's objective or not, and talk to them about where they are between their, you know what I mean, where you are now. But hey, Sally, you're only 14 years old, but this is what it looks like to be good at the university and so. Leave their mechanics alone. Leave their patterns alone. There is literally nothing behind it. There is no thought on whether or not they should be working overhead in their load, rotating, keeping their hands together, like all kinds of wackiness. It's just like, just so that there's something to coach on. And of course, when an athlete goes to the university of such and such, they think that that person is the messiah of pitching. You know what I mean? And so they're going to do everything. And I'm like, oh, this is such a tough position, because we never put ourselves in a position where we're like, that's stupid. That, like, we don't talk like that with the athletes. Like, okay, listen, remember when you come to OGX, the goal is to be very educated on your own self. You can never expect to go somewhere else, even at college, even camp, whatever, for them to have that level of education on you. That's impossible. What do you know about why your load looks like this? What do we know about your rotational capacity? Like, we got to backtrack it for them. So, like, do you feel better doing that? They're like, well, she said it would take me some time, you know, things like that. I'm like, no, and movement is where it should be. It should be. So I think, like, every year we probably have like 5 or 6 athletes that go to the college camp. And, you know, and these are usually sort of like, when they're at like really elite level colleges, I'm like, just talk to them about data. I know you got it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Just tell
like,
them.
Yeah, you're a drop ball pitcher. And so this drop ball would need to be at this break, or your velo would need to be here. And you've got 3 years to make that happen. Thanks for coming to camp. Godspeed. You know, like, I think, like, please. And that's a real thing. You know, it's like a real thing. But when they come back with all of their patterns changed, I'm like, that, my friends, is spooky.
It is spooky. I have a good one, and it ties to the World Series. Okay. What else is spooky is humiliating, shaming, being super aggressive about children making mistakes in travel ball. Because if we just happen to turn on the literal highest stakes game version of baseball, not softball, but the highest stakes baseball game last night, and saw
people are kicking balls in center field.
Second highest. He's the second highest paid. Yes, I think he's like after Ohtani.
Aaron Judge,
second highest paid, something third highest paid player in the whole league, drop a routine pop fly in the highest stakes game. Like, you know, it happens. That things happen, and this is rested adults who get paid for this. So I think maybe if we're walking around the travel ball fields and you have the urge to be like, my daughter's the pitcher and I'm mad because the 14-year-old center fielder made a mistake that cost the game, or my daughter's the center fielder and I'm mad because she made that mistake, or I'm the coach and I'm mad because she made that mistake. Let's just not. Maybe let's just really try not to feel that emotion.
You know what I think is spooky, Krista? Travel ball. Can we just leave it at that? That shit is spooky. I don't even need a granular detail. That's just spooky. I have another one. I'm thinking of them as they're coming. This is fun.
This is actually just a therapy session for us.
It is. We're going to spin the next episode to be something just like really optimistic. Yes, because we also sound like super nasty right now, but this is fun. Let's keep it going. Okay, when someone says, this is kind of like, I didn't hit my spots. The break version of that is like, it didn't break. I'm like, it always has, the pitch always breaks.
Right.
It always breaks. It's gonna have a little bit of vertical. It's gonna have a little horizontal. Sometimes the break is true 0-0, but that's pretty rare to see a pitch that's totally 0-0. There's always some break. And so, like, did it not have enough break? Did it not have enough vertical? Did it not have enough this? So, like, her pitches aren't breaking. Yes, they are. That is basically like when a pitch got hit, but it's like it's breaking. Sometimes maybe we don't want it to break, and it is breaking a little bit. So I think sometimes when I'm on calls, I've noticed this a little bit whenever I'm in conversation where we don't have objective data to tell us the details about a pitch. This is where the phrase is like, she doesn't hit her spots, or like her pitches don't break. I'm like, They all break. Nothing this athlete throws, you know, like is a 0-0 here. They all break. We have to determine when it has this particular break profile, it gets more swings and misses. When it has this particular break profile. And sometimes that means more break and sometimes it means less break. And so we just like have to differentiate that. But I think that general phrase, it's kind of the equivalent to me with like the hitting spots, you know?
Well, I think of we had a pitcher who we trained for a really long time. She's in college now, who played for me. And I think we talked about this before, but to swing this slightly optimistic of maybe what would be a better conversation would be like, there were times where this was a backspin kid, like she didn't lose backspin. And I knew that, like, this isn't like, and then today her pitches didn't break. That was never a conversation because by default of her patterns, it always broke. But we would have conversation of, I didn't have in-game travel ball objective data, obviously. So I was seeing things with results in my eye and making some inferences. So the conversation would be a little bit more of like, something was different because they were fouling off a lot more. We couldn't get the swing and miss. Like on this pitch, we weren't doing whatever, like, you know, that type of thing. And so then there was some conversation around like at that, you know, I think later in that pitcher's career, we kind of knew what the something was faster, but early on it was like, okay, let's figure out what the something is, like what changes about your pitchers. So it's like all of a sudden, I think to your point, like it's like, oh, we have a little horizontal and we're actually better when we don't have horizontal. So we take
or it has less
like,
break. It's a +2 instead of a +4.5.
Right.
And that matters,
and this is,
you know?
Right. And that helps me to know as the coach of like when to take that kid out because she's fatigued. And that's what happens when she gets fatigued or whatever. Yeah. So I think that there's like, or that pitch is really, it's a good pitch, but it's not as good without her off speed. So when her off speed's off, it's like, it's not that pitch isn't breaking. It's just that it's not that good of a pitch without the off speed. So there's like real conversations. I think that's what we're saying. That's the same thing as what I'm saying about the hitters is like, I didn't do good. I pulled my shoulder out. I didn't keep my eye on it. They say similar probably what their coach said to them or their parents said to them. And I always say like, well, what does that mean for you? Like, you know, your swing, you've seen high speed, you know, in here, you've gotten so much feedback. Like, what do you mean by that? When you say that you pulled your shoulder out, that's not really something we've struggled with in the past. It's not really something that is your pattern. So what would that maybe mean actually for you? It's just being a little bit more for hitters. The ball tells you a lot, right? So like where the foul balls are going and what you're doing, it tells you a lot, but it needs to tell you something specific to you instead of just like, I popped it up, so therefore I must be dropping my hands. I hit a ground ball to shortstop, therefore I must be rolling over it. It's like, that's not always true because each hitter has her own swing patterns. And so when you roll it over, it usually for you means X. You need to know what that means. And then that's how you're attacking it. So it's just like we have
it's really
all the way
odd.
back. It's like we have the education, we have the knowledge for these kids. So it's like, this isn't based off random. These athletes that train with us, they have all of this information. So for
what's really hard with hitting, Krista, is that like every time someone pops it up and people are like, you drop your shoulder or whatever, it's also possible that's not even true. And literally the pitch just beat you. Like it's even possible that like this swing, you took a good swing on a pitch, but you didn't get on plane because the pitch beat you.
Right.
Like there's also an element of
different.
Yes. I mean, so there's like, that's so interesting. You'll never know that.
Right.
Like
you probably could just watch high speed and it's almost never like she didn't keep her head on it. She pulled her shoulder out. She dropped her hands. Those three are almost never true. Like
those three are spooky enough to never use.
Yeah. They're almost never what actually happened. Like people don't just like, unless you're very young or something, you don't just like drop your hands and switch like that. That's not why people pop up. So, and the large majority of the kids it doesn't mean they don't pop up. But a large majority of our kids have swing patterns that actually make them mostly hit the ball on the ground. So when they're popping up in the air, they didn't suddenly drop their hands. They have the same swing patterns, just the timing of it. If they're coming down and the timing of it usually makes the ball go up. So it's anyways, not true. But I think what is hard for us is we're like, we have all this information. We don't need to resort back to these random statements and thoughts and
like snapping in front of their eyes, like, wake up.
Yes.
Come back.
Right. You can like, so it's just like trying to keep them on. You're like, when you don't throw strikes or you don't hit your spots, that's probably, it's one, is that even true? Do you even need to on that pitch? But also like, what does that usually mean for you? Like, let's be more specific than just like, you know, those types of things. So I think kind of knowing and getting to the roots of those things instead of just these like random things. Definitely.
In pitching,
the randomness is a little spooky.
Like in the 90s, you know, like and earlier. I mean, the early 2000s. I mean, like long before, when we were in sort of like the infancy of like what we could see as pitching, people threw really hard and they hit spots. They could command velocity. And then
it was from 40 feet with a white ball.
Exactly, with a white ball. And hitters are terrible. I mean, you see some of these swings, and you look at like, and then if they could create break on the pitch, if you see the swings, these swings were not like of the ultimate level of adjustability. Mm-hmm. So this is really where the world of like, that's how you're successful. You have to hit your spots and you have to create break. That's it. Like you have to make the ball move or it doesn't. It's like this very like black and white kind of train of thought. It's also where this world of like, I create break. I'm not a velocity pitcher. Like I'm not, does that make like, not to say you can't be an off-speed breaking pitcher. Like that's a thing, but people put those against each other. I'm going for spin. They'll say spin. I'm going for spin. And so like, I haven't been concentrating on velocity. I'm like, they should be going together. They should be going together, you know? You can create more on the ball when you have better slot. You get a better slot when the body and the arm connect a little bit more, you know, like it's all together. But this like world of like very black and white, this is what you do. That's kind of where it like emerges for pitching. But we just pitching is a way different craft now than it used to be.
No, so, totally. I was thinking that when I was watching
don't say stuff from the past.
The game yesterday with it was the pitcher that threw before Bueller. I can't remember, but he had like a sweeper, which has become really popular in baseball. And I was actually thinking like, this is interesting. This is kind of like a Brooke Festal type pitch. Like we are starting to see this type of pitch more in softball too. It's this like weird spinny Frisbee looking thing. And he was throwing those. He also threw 97 in the up and, but he mostly threw sweepers, but then he had the threat of that, which was helpful. But even baseball, like I don't think even definitely not 5 years ago, you would have turned on the World Series and seen a pitcher throw a pitch like that. Like that pitch didn't exist. And so through this, like we first attacked patterns and velo, and baseball really, everyone started throwing harder and figuring out how to tap into more. And then because they have so much data and they have so much in-game data, when they started identifying like basically the hitters then could hit that because they saw more of it. So they were like, okay, well, we can't just throw that. And so they just slowly worked off of barrels that way. And that's what's happening to softball, that the more information you have and the more you can work off barrels, like that's your goal. So you're going to like more pitches will emerge, more ideas will emerge, different off speeds will emerge because you'll figure those things out. It's not a bad thing. And it's not a critique of the past, but you didn't have all this access to information. If I know a pitcher throws 67 bullet, then I just can go sit on that, so like we started to we had to create other things off of it. And I think that's just like what the game is. And the highest level of the game, the highest level, I see the game, and that's rude because we have the higher level of softball and we want it to keep being higher. But I'm just in the World Series brain from last night, the highest level of baseball, you see this happening and changing all the time because they have so much access to information and player development and all of this. So
and it's really changing in softball too. It's really it's changing in softball too. And I even like sometimes yesterday I got off a call with a coach in a consulting call, and I'm like, we don't even like note in this particular conference because it's such a good conference that like that 67 is hard. It's really not. In that conference, it's not. Everyone's going to throw 67. All the velo pitchers. And so I'm just like, it's just not. And I'm like, it's kind of wild. Like a couple of years ago, that would not have been the case. Like when we were watching people throw like 68 to 70, it would have been like, she's really going for it. And it's just, so I think like, we're like, okay, what else does she have? She can't just have this. We can't have that. So it's the same concept in pitching. And so these like spooky phrases are as if the craft has not evolved at all. It's basically like pretending as if it's still 1997. You know what I mean?
Right.
And like, that's what the craft is. It's hit your spots or make the ball break a little bit. It's like, no, please stop talking about it like that. Especially when Sally Sue, we talk about this all the time. It's hard for them. They're just kids. And it's like the phrases they're hearing from their coaches. It's what maybe their parents, hopefully not, or what are saying to them in the car, whatever, So, it's hard. They just get like absorbed into that because that's like, those are the buzzwords, but that's what it is. It's just like a lack of recognition of like what the craft has really entails anymore.
Right. Well, and it does, as all things do it, because it's evolved and we've learned more and we have more access to information and knowledge, and you can use that to your advantage to sort of like outsmart and in a variety, and data comes in a variety of ways. It can come in matchups, it can come in how you approach things from hitting, it can come in preparing for spin profiles you're going to see, and different things you're going to see. In pitching, it can come from seeing where you're getting swings and misses, like sort of generally across the whole game, but also like against different lineups and different swings and that type of thing. And all of that lets you, if you can, you're going to do what you can. Maybe all you can do is, as a pitching staff, is throw a staff differently. Maybe you can prepare your staff to have other tools. You can add tools to them if that's an option that you can do. You can change where they're standing in the rubber to have it create a different angle. There's lots of things that you can play with. And data then tells you, is that working or not? And
right.
that's like, you're just trying to take it from that standpoint. So I think that's obviously how we approach things more specifically. So it's very like, you got the brunt of it when I was still in travel ball of like, I never came and said like, she's not hitting her spots, but I would often come and say like, I hear you saying this is a good pitch, but it ain't working.
It's not, it's not translating. Something's gotta be going on.
So what, like, am I not calling the right offsetting pitches? Like, does it have to be in a certain location for it to work? Like, was it not doing what it normally does? Like, does she change in game? There's all kinds of conversations that happen. It's not just like, take it as is. Yes, there's lots of back and forth from that standpoint, but that's the conversation. Same with hitting. It's like, I hear you say she has a good swing, but XYZ happens. It's like, okay, well, what was the pitch? What was the swing decision? There's a lot of things that go into that, of like what actually unfolded for her to not have success in that moment.
It's usually a reason too. It's usually a reason, like, that's what the data has helped us learn is like, okay, there's a difference when it's thrown at this spin rate versus this spin rate. It's depending on its velo, its break profile, when it's thrown through this part of the zone versus this part of the zone. Does it have an off speed pitch that goes with it? Like, there's all of these like little branches of details that tell us like, okay, this pitch, if it had this, we'd be in business. Like, she needs to grow.
It's not just like she didn't want it enough.
Exactly. It's not, spooky. It shouldn't be, right. She did. Oh yeah. We should talk about that one. But it's not just like this pitch is screaming that it's one of the better pitches in the game and it just doesn't work. It's very, very rare unless we were literally talking about some sort of like performance anxiety thing. That gives me I have two spooky things. The one is when a pitcher is like exhausted or gets hit the third time through the lineup, when we know it's a damn near miracle she went 2 times through the lineup based on the tools that she has. And we say she stopped competing. She didn't work hard. She didn't like do whatever.
Well, it's crazy. It's
that's
like
a spooky
last night in that bad inning that the Yankees had, when you were following on like Twitter, people were like, you got to get him out of there. He's roasting. No one was like, even though he also didn't cover first base,
doesn't have the heart to win the World Series.
Right. No one was like,
they're on him.
Were just like, get him out. What are we doing?
Why you have a staff, right? Is this like switch it up?
It's just like we got
such a pitching thing, man.
Yeah.
Because when the craft was low, it's the same concept. When what was required of the craft was really low, as we talked about, it was just like an internal like gut check. You know what I'm saying? It's just literally like who competes their way through. But because the crafts, plural, of pitching and hitting are so much more elevated,
just so much more information.
Yeah. Then that's not just what it takes. We talked about this before when we talked about like, do we think Ashley could win the World Series back in her day just because she has the heart of Rocky Balboa? Probably not, right? Like, this isn't what it is, So, yes, it's the same concept. I was also going to say, I don't know if I would call this spooky because this one is not like, oh, it annoys me so much. I brought this up. This has been coming up a lot in consulting calls that I've been having where I'm like, okay, how's this pitcher doing? Like, this drop ball's looking good. This looks great. How's she doing? They're like, oh no, she just can't. She's like a mess. I'm like, well, what do you mean she's a mess? What's going on? And then they say, like, she needs our sports psychologist. Like, she just can't. Does that happen sometimes? Absolutely. And then I'm like, okay, well, let's at least try to see if there's like something physical going on here, or maybe we don't see her data early on and they're just like, she did terrible this week because as soon as she goes in game, she can't compete. I'm like, okay, can we get some data? They don't have yak. Can you throw Rapsodo down in thing? And what we actually see is that like, she has like really stiff arm action in the game, probably from some performance anxiety, but literally her breaking pitches look totally different. I'm like, okay, it's intertwined, but let's work through, like, let's attach something physical to it instead of just like hands off, it's all on the sports psychologist, which I do think happens. Something I often recommend in consulting is like, give her some training days where she throws in the bullpen. She works at like on the craft. She feels relaxed. Then she goes right in and faces hitters. We measure it. Is it holding? We bring her back. And then she kind of bounces back and forth into some sort of like live situation and back and forth. Not to say I don't believe in sports psychology, not to say that I don't believe in performance anxiety, but I also think there are like a physical approach. I don't think I've ever had this completely like, there's nothing we can possibly do.
Well,
sometimes we exhaust all measures.
At the end of the day, even when you think about like your own mental stuff, like there's a physical component that happens.
Oh, it's so intertwined.
So it's like,
absolutely.
Yeah. And so it's like, we have done this a lot with sort of overhand yips and underhand some stuff, but with overhand, we had some like catchers who couldn't throw back, and they obviously were also talking to sports psychologists and working through, because it's certainly a mental thing, but we, in addition, would put like different plyos and weighted balls, and they would throw different weights back. So basically, like, as their brain, and honestly, you know this, I haven't had this in a long time, but I've had front toss in my coaching career, and I actually the similar thing helped me. So it wasn't like, oh, this is all physical, in the sense that like what took over my body was like, I know the feeling. I had yips throwing the first base as a pitcher in high school too, like a similar concept. But we've had a lot of success in doing some like just variability in what they're throwing back, to basically, as their brain is starting to allow them, that they reconnect their feeling to something, it creates some variability. So it's like a physical component. So I think it's good tactful things.
We see this all the time. Like, the data is really empowering because it gives them like a sense of truth. Like, when you say to an athlete, you like, basically you're just crazy. And I know no one is saying that. So let me be clear. These coaches are not saying she's crazy. They're like, she's really struggling with like, she can't handle XYZ. It always comes back to something that's like mental, emotional, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That was really not a good way for me to describe that. But like, that they're trying to say, I'm thinking of like when you go to the doctor and you're like, something's not right with me. And they're like, basically you're crazy,
Right.
There's a little bit of that where I'm like, but when you show them something concrete, like, actually, we're getting some horizontal break on this pitch when we're doing this. Like, we're going to train like this week. We're going to do this. Like, there's something physical that we can actually, an objective we can go back to show why there's a disconnect when you're in this environment versus this. It's like freeing. If the athlete's basically like, I'm not just crazy.
Right. I actually, like,
there's actually something I can like train. All of a sudden, control comes back to them.
Right.
Like, I would say, the majority of times that I have dealt with either directly with athletes or through the college consulting process, the minority of these cases are just truly of like, there's a major performance anxiety issue we have on our hands. That has only happened in the minority of cases. Does it exist? Of course. But the majority of times, there's a physical thing unraveling that we just couldn't identify, whether we didn't have the right data, we didn't, whatever. There's a physical thing happening and we couldn't get to it in order to like show that picture and then to train through it. So when you do, those are some of the most rewarding like experiences, is when you give someone objective data and they just thought like, I just thought I was like weak. I thought I wasn't this, I wasn't that. And then we're like, no, there was something physical we had to go after.
Right.
So anyway, I don't know if I call that spooky, because that's not like people are doing a bad thing. It's easy to be like,
they're trying
here.
Right. They're trying to help.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It just kind of reminded me of it, because that's come up a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm so relieved when they say to me, like, she's struggling to do XYZ. And then we dig into the data and we find something physical. Right. I'm so relieved. I'm like, no, we have control still. Yes. And as the control obsessed person that I am, I'm like, yes, I'm so happy. We got this. She's going to be transformed.
What's your sign? Someone was asking me this yesterday. They weren't asking me your sign. They were asking me my sign. Okay. And something about Virgos. What is your sign?
I'm an Aries. Which I don't even know what that is.
I don't know what that means. All I know about Virgos is they're like obsessive control, basically, like super rule follower, obsessive control, like whatever. So
that tracks, right?
Yeah, probably pretty true. Let's have to see if that's true about Aries. I was
like, that tracks, right? I said right to you. I think
something about Aries, like they do a bunch of things, but it's hard for them to like finish projects.
Aries?
Yeah, I think that's true about Aries.
Tracks. I like how we're being gentle as if we don't know if we know each other. I'm like, you're like someone who's obsessed with control. I'm like, that tracks, right, Krista? Like, I think that tracks. But what I'm saying is like, do you give me permission to say that tracks?
Yeah. Well, Virgo, my horoscope said it or whatever. My astrology said it. So, all right. Well, everyone, with that, enjoy your Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Hopefully everyone is just taking a little fun breather. That's why I like Halloween. It's like
Me too. It's fun.
People like get into it and there's just like, there's nothing. Tomorrow's my son's birthday, so that's always fun to back it up with a birthday
today at the bus stop. Grown ass man just wearing a full suit that was all pumpkins and skeletons.
I went to the gym. I went to the gym this morning, and there was one of the trainers was just in a Garfield, like a giant Garfield thing with like a big belly, just training a woman. I was like, this is weird.
Yeah.
Oh well.
I'm like, is it cool or terrifying? Don't know, but I think I like it.
Yeah, it's a weird vibe, but it's fun.
It's fun. It's easy to just like take a breather for a minute and like.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully.
This was a very offensive episode. Everyone out there has said or is saying spooky things. Sorry, man. That was just the recommendation from our team. What to go for? Spooky episode.
Yeah, it's just fun for them. So maybe we won't let our marketing clip this one because then we'll have all the people commenting about all the things. So
yeah.
Although
who is that person? And she doesn't know. She doesn't know anything. She doesn't even know what she's talking about.
This lady doesn't know what she's talking about or doesn't know anything, something like that.
I like
if you haven't seen our viral Facebook post, go check it out because it's truly a treat. The comments and the conversation are super fun.
As Krista calls it, the gift that keeps on giving.
When I get alerts from that post, I love them because they're hilarious and also like it was what you were saying in that clip, but it also like wasn't fully what you were saying. It was like sort of out of context and like such a social media thing for that to be just really causing such a conversation. Yeah. So, all right. Well, on that note, until next week, where we will
see you next week,
be doing something more
optimistic.